A pair of individuals are currently arguing about you. You didn't initiate the conflict. Thus, in some location right now, your identity is the topic of debate. The true cause driving this, which no one present is voicing or will voice, is your actual reality. It is not a rumor or a falsehood regarding you. It is the truth. That truth is on the verge of prevailing. Once I explain why, I believe it will resonate in an unexpected way, far deeper than simple affection or standing up for you. This situation transcends mere popularity. Instead, it stems from something you unconsciously created, that stepped into a room and accomplished what you could not have achieved on your own. Stay engaged with me, as you need to perceive the full picture before understanding its significance. Envision the scene. Two individuals are engaged in a dispute that is far from peaceful. They're not being mindful of one another's emotions. The moment is genuine. The conflict is intense. One individual holds their arms tightly crossed, as if keeping composure, while the other repeatedly throws their hands up in sheer disbelief. Unexpectedly, an individual in that room, someone outside your immediate circle, whom you wouldn't have bet on, speaks up to state that the claims are false. Everything changes at that instant. Yet, I cannot jump ahead just yet. You must first grasp the gravity of the accusations, as the defense only becomes clear when you comprehend what it opposed. Here is how the event began. God clears throat. We focus on the initial attack rather than the response. You need to realize what someone dared to assert about you when they felt safe. Believing no one who truly understood you was listening closely enough to notice. Observing the speaker reveals a confident, practiced delivery, as if this grievance had rested within them, awaiting an agreeable audience and opportune timing. Their opening statement claims that you view yourself as superior to others. They suggest your demeanor and presence project arrogance, causing others to feel diminished simply by your proximity. A message that takes root because certain listeners lack a deeper knowledge of you. They simply do not know who you really are. They have only encountered your name casually within specific contexts. That opening line accomplishes its exact intended purpose. It steers the collective perception subtly in an unfavorable direction. It clears throat, plants a seed of bias, capturing everyone's full attention. At that point, the advocate steps in. There is no hesitation, faltering, or uncertain hedging in their delivery. They directly counter that what appears as arrogance is actually the strength gained from enduring trials most people present could not survive. What seems like pride is simply how it appears. When individual ceases apologizing for occupying space, it is not pride. You can sense that explanation registering quite differently than the initial attack did. Yet the accuser has not finished. When an initial approach fails, individuals of this nature do not retreat. They change tactics. They dismissively grant that point. They insist that no one is genuinely that authentic in reality. They claim it is merely an act. Importantly, the advocate defending you is not an ideal hero with a prepared speech. They offer a brief, quiet laugh. Indeed, it is a weary laugh. It resembles the tired chuckle of someone accustomed to hearing this allegation leveled at decent individuals and exhausted by it. They note that if it were an act, it would not remain consistent across every setting. That constitutes the entire point. That concise observation serves as the entire reply. The room falls silent briefly, because that specific detail impacts the audience differently than previous claims. The critic senses this shift. One can observe the change in their facial expression the instant they realize they are losing the crowd. Consequently, they raise their voice, which is typical behavior when individuals feel their stance weakening. They increase their volume rather than offering actual evidence. They assert that others lack their intimate knowledge of you. They insist your behavior is premeditated. They claim your goodwill is performed solely for an audience. They contend you project one image publicly, while being entirely different behind closed doors. That sums up their whole speech. At this point, the advocate's countenance shifts. Rather than showing rage, their look becomes quieter, cooler, and more resolute. They then deliver the statement that truly settles the matter. They state that they have observed you over many years. They recount observing how you treat complete strangers, who offer you no personal advantage. They mention noting how you conduct yourself during moments of disappointment, while attempting to keep it hidden. They highlight seeing you choose the honorable path in circumstances where doing so required personal sacrifice. They tell the accuser not to define your character after years of attentive observation, a point from which one cannot easily recover. Recovery is impossible when years of quiet proof are presented in 30 seconds flat. Consider this additional aspect. No one has explicitly mentioned it yet. A third observer was present in that space. Up until that moment, this person had been quietly leaning toward accepting the negative impression of you. This occurred gradually rather than dramatically. It was the subtle accumulation resulting from hearing minor criticisms repeated continually, or from interpreting a single awkward interaction as more significant than it was. An inaccurate image was forming in their mind until the advocate spoke, prompting a reset in their view. This change was not total. Individuals do not entirely reverse their convictions in a single instance. Nevertheless, the subtle private narrative building against you, without your awareness or consent, sustained a blow. It fractured. Uncertainty was introduced into their skepticism. That listener is now questioning the negative narrative they had begun to accept. You will likely never receive a communication admitting to their prior doubt. Such resolutions do not typically occur in that manner. Yet a genuine transformation took place in a space you did not occupy, achieved without you lifting a finger. Now, we reach the insight promised at the start. The underlying cause of this event extends beyond a single day. It goes beyond mere personal fondness from someone. Rather, you provided them with something significant, likely unintentionally. Unknowingly, you offered an impression so solid that they could not disregard it when someone challenged your character. You provided them with tangible proof. It was not a formal speech or explicit statement regarding your integrity. It was evidence gathered silently through subtle, ordinary moments over time, such as how you managed adversity without shifting the burden onto those around you, or how you treated an individual who possessed no ability to benefit you, or how you consistently showed up during inconvenient times when no one was tracking your efforts. Yet you remained unaware of that impact as well. All these actions accumulated quietly without any tracking on your part. Your advocate possessed proof, not in writing, but derived from watching you maintain consistency, where yielding would have been far easier. When presented with a conflicting narrative, those established records were already present and could not be twisted into something malicious. That is why the advocate did not hesitate, not even for a moment. Indeed, now I wish to examine the deeper dimension, as it contains the most vital and arguably most unsettling aspect. The dispute was never truly centered on you. Although that may seem counterintuitive as you envision two people arguing about your name, follow this reasoning. Your very reality and your distinct manner of navigating life exert a form of pressure. When others encounter that influence, an internal reaction occurs that addresses not you directly, but unexamined facets of their own selves. Let me pause at this point. Depending on what resides within them, that internal response varies significantly across individuals. Consider the individual who initiated the attack. Reflect on this moment. They were never responding to your genuine self. They lack the perspective needed to see you clearly and react to the real person. Their reaction is driven entirely by what your existence evokes inside them. Here lies the unsettling reality. At some point, That person chose to halt their growth, play it safe, and restrict their potential. Perhaps they dissuaded themselves from pursuing a heartfelt ambition, or maybe they persuaded themselves that specific opportunities were unreachable for someone like them, only for you to arrive simply living as yourself. By refusing to impose those same limits upon yourself, you unintentionally changed things. You became a constant reminder of the compromise they selected. Facing that realization is deeply challenging. Consequently, individuals react in predictable ways. Yes, when a realization becomes overwhelming, they craft a narrative to reframe it. They construct a narrative asserting that a flaw exists within you, labeling you as arrogant, insincere, or scheming justifies the boundaries they placed on themselves. It validates their past choice as the prudent path, after all. Meanwhile, your sheer authentic presence makes maintaining that narrative increasingly difficult. Many among you have experienced a variation of this dynamic throughout life. This stems not merely from one individual, but from people expected to provide safety. Persons who discouraged you from making an effort before you even attempted it. An associate who grew distant the moment success came your way. Individuals who professed care, yet struggled to be near you once your dependence on them ended, leaving you to spend years questioning your actions, diminishing your presence, adapting, or downplaying yourself to identify what provoked others, obscured the reality that their reaction was never sparked by a flaw. It was simply your genuine self. That clarity is emerging distinctly right now. The present circumstance is not unprecedented. It represents the latest chapter of a pattern that has accompanied you for a long time. Its repetition occurs not because you possess an inherent defect. Rather, you hold qualities that certain individuals simply cannot cope with. The underlying issue resides within them and remains their burden to manage, not yours. You are not damaged, nor is your defender. They do not represent a flawless or uncomplicated hero. They're also acting out of personal interest. You provide evidence of a reality they personally needed to confirm as achievable. Perhaps it is the idea that honorable individuals are not inevitably penalized for remaining honest, or that steadfast behavior ultimately yields value over time. Or perhaps, surrounded by insincere displays of goodwill, you offered the single authentic element they could rely upon. They required that touchstone. They safeguard that proof because it carries deep personal meaning, serving less to protect your status and more to preserve their own hope. Ultimately, two people stand discussing your name, yet neither is truly addressing you personally. They are articulating feelings sparked by your presence regarding unexamined aspects of themselves, an effect you did not intentionally create. No action is required from you at present. You have already fulfilled the only responsibility that belonged to you. You simply persisted in being your true self. This instance is not the first venue where that individual engaged in such behavior. I share this cautiously to avoid causing unnecessary distress. Equally, you should not dismiss it as meaningless. This behavior constitutes a recurring habit. It has unfolded through hallway chatter, digital messages, and passive remarks whenever your name arose, spanning longer than you might imagine. Subtle dynamics you recently observed, an unexpected distant tone from a familiar acquaintance, an odd shift within a comfortable circle, or a vague feeling that something was amiss relate to this. Much of that leads directly back to this situation. And Clear's Throat individual has been quietly constructing a fictitious portrait of you. You are fully justified in allowing yourself to feel genuine indignation about it. Do not hold on to it indefinitely. No, do not remain trapped in that emotion. No, not permanently. Avoid letting it consume your inner peace. Yet for one brief moment, acknowledge the feeling since someone dedicated real time and effort to building an inaccurate narrative about you and sharing it with people you value. That action was no accident. It was an intentional choice repeated deliberately. Feeling anger over it is completely valid. Here is why this matter is emerging so prominently at present. A broader shift is occurring in your environment. It is removing the protective distance that previously kept hidden matters concealed. What once existed silently in the background is now being spoken openly. Conversations intended to remain secret are becoming exposed, regardless of whether the participants intended it. The architect of that narrative assumed their story would remain safely hidden in the margins, whispered privately among select ears. They failed to anticipate current developments. The confrontation you imagine demonstrates precisely how this momentum operates. It brings covert dialogue into a room of observers, forcing hidden claims to face genuine scrutiny. And those claims are failing to survive. A significant turning point is approaching within the coming days. This shift relates not to your public standing, but entirely to your personal sphere, namely, what is voiced about you when you are not present. The narratives circulating in kitchens, group messages, and intimate circles. That precise domain is being exposed right now. It is being illuminated. It resembles someone switching on a bright light in a room kept dark for a long duration. They built distorted versions of your character. Those fabrications fail under bright light as everything buried below the surface gets drawn upward. Not every detail emerges simultaneously. Certain individuals remain overly attached to a version of you that protects their self-image, making them reluctant to yield it. Yet, others will realize that the narrative they partially accepted no longer stands up to scrutiny. That realization occurs without you taking any direct action to cause it. For many observing this, the person who targeted you is no stranger. Typically, they are not someone you would classify as an adversary. This was an individual allowed into your close circle. They occupied an active place in your life, rather than remaining on the periphery. You entrusted them with vulnerable details not shared with just anyone. This was not due to carelessness on your part. Rather, you sincerely regarded them as trustworthy. What renders this betrayal particularly painful is their use of actual facts. They did not fabricate stories out of nothing. They took genuine, vulnerable details shared in trust and distorted their meaning. They altered the context, omitted explanatory details, and emphasized only elements that could frame you unfavorably. The resulting narrative resembles reality closely enough that dismantling it completely proves difficult. That outcome reflects no innocent misunderstanding. It represents a deliberate and calculated form of malice. I will not claim that you owe anyone immediate forgiveness or a fixed timeline for reconciliation. That schedule remains entirely under your personal discretion. What I will emphasize is this point. The deception constructed from factual details failed to achieve its intended goal. Those who needed the truth received it, at least in part. This occurred not through your self-defense or confrontation, but because an attentive observer stepped in and asserted the truth based on your life's work. You were not required to intervene. For others among you, this scenario feels unfamiliar or distinct. Indeed, you might not pinpoint one single act of betrayal. Instead, you recognize a subtle sense that attitudes shifted among certain people without obvious reason. When someone's demeanor altered, you reflexively searched past interactions for a misstep, finding nothing because no personal error existed. That change in their behavior had no connection to your actions. I emphasize that point once more. It stemmed entirely from external claims influencing their perspective. Your initial intuitive sense, which registered before conscious analysis, was accurate. It was correct from the very beginning. A physical instinct often registers before cognitive awareness follows. You enter a space, view a message, or hear your name spoken, and an underlying instinct alerts you that something is wrong. Do not permit anyone to persuade you against that instinct. You are not overly sensitive. You are not imagining these dynamics. You are not being paranoid. Your perception is valid, and that distinction matters significantly. Being defended in your absence carries a uniquely profound significance. I return to this point as it represents perhaps the most critical insight shared. You did not request it. You were unaware it took place. You could not stage or perform for it. You could not offer timely remarks to sway the audience in your favor. You were unable to offer explanations, context, or clarification. You were simply absent. Consequently, your sole representation in that environment was the plain reality of your character. That reality was recognized over time by an observer who had genuinely been paying attention. Reflect upon the weight of that truth for a moment. That defense was not something deliberately manufactured. It is not a calculated strategy. It is not an asset you can fully claim to have engineered. It is purely the result of who you are. It distilled over time into evidence that prompted another individual to risk their standing to defend you unscripted before others. Their delivery was not flawless. They likely stumbled over phrasing or omitted certain details. A moment may have occurred where the criticism gained traction, putting the outcome in doubt. The advocate is far from perfect. They possess their own shortcomings and personal struggles. They carry their own contradictions. Yet, they chose to support you when remaining silent would have been much easier. They could have checked their phone and allowed the dialogue to proceed without intervention. Most individuals remain silent. Most weigh the personal cost of speaking out and conclude it is not worth taking the risk. That individual engaged in no such calculation. They simply spoke up. Allow that realization to resonate fully. It is worth addressing the accuser, as well as their effort to craft and distribute a false image carries consequences for them. That undertaking exacts a personal toll on them. This does not manifest as a dramatic, tidy exposure followed by public applause. No, life rarely unfolds in that dramatic fashion. Real life is not a scripted film. It is simply reality. The toll imposed on them is subtle and far more enduring than superficial retribution. Investing continuous effort into an untrue story builds nothing constructive. It amounts to draining one's vitality into a void. Each time they repeat, refine, or share that false narrative, they feed a petty and fearful aspect of their character, a fragile side that cannot observe your existence without flinching. Eventually, likely in solitude late at night when distractions fade, leaving them alone with their thoughts, they will feel the heavy burden of having devoted themselves to a delusion. A sense of pity nearly arises for them. Indeed, when reflecting on that reality, it is not genuine sympathy nor forgiveness offered on your behalf. No. Yet I recognize that particular affliction, the dynamic that transforms another's existence into a judgment of oneself and turns an uninvolved person into an obsession. That dynamic does not represent power. It reflects a profound form of powerlessness. You are under no obligation to resolve it. You need not comprehend it fully or offer immediate forgiveness. You should not diminish yourself to alleviate another's insecurity. Their personal healing was never your burden to bear. Consider this essential truth. Attempting to directly correct the rumors circulating about you often proves ineffective and can escalate the issue if you intervene defensively. The narrative then shifts from your true identity to a debate over your persuasive ability. Individuals who have formed firm prejudices will not be dissuaded by personal explanations. They are overly committed to the false narrative they chose to embrace. Only the passage of time truly resolves such misperceptions. Indeed, resolution relies on the gradual accumulation of authentic evidence observed by those who remain present over time. That is the entire solution. I realize that may feel inadequate. It can feel as though you ought to take active steps to prove your standing. A distinct feeling of powerlessness comes with being discussed, while knowing the most effective response is to live normally and let truth prevail in unseen spaces. Nevertheless, that approach is proving effective. It operates quietly without your intervention. As your advocate today is not the sole person to weigh your authentic self against falsehoods and choose reality. This dynamic has occurred previously, will repeat in the future, and remains validated by more individuals than you realize.